and the thousands more who will die in the meantime to continue this debate towards reform. Thank you.
Sean Berry. Deputy Speaker, I want to speak very briefly as I spoke in favour of the bill at its second reading in November as well. Decisions made, and for transparency, including financial transparency, demographic data and other statistics from those who are supervising decisions and providing the new service, including the new supervising commissioner. The ability to monitor the implementation of this policy, ensure it's working as intended and detect any problems immediately is really important to me. I will also back changes in the process that ask for more training for those taking part in decisions and to ensure fair and effective communication throughout, including new language requirements. However, I am not currently aiming to support some of the amendments that I think place undue, compulsory, additional burdens, hurdles, intrusions or demands on those people who are applying for permission to make this choice beyond what is in the current bill. Because I know from what I have heard, from the experiences of so many of my constituents in Brighton Pavilion, and from the statistics, that the people asking for this choice will be, by definition, at the end of a horrible disease, very often terminal cancer, which they have fought and fought with their doctors for a long time, and that they will now be facing their final months in a situation of potentially huge suffering over which they have no control and fear greatly. We must all remember that only dying people are eligible, and in the vast majority of these cases, the person's eligibility, capacity and reasons will be more than clear to the decision makers, and I believe we must enable those cases to be approved in a respectful, caring and compassionate way, and as swiftly as the current bill process allows. In other cases where things are less clear, I agree. Many more questions may need to be asked, and I believe that the professionals currently tasked in this rigorous process under the bill's proposals will be very well placed to judge when more information, consultation and investigation will be necessary. The current rules, along with the new amendments I support, mean that they will also have to account very clearly for what they ask and what they decide under effective scrutiny. Therefore, I cannot support some of the proposals that will make every single applicant subject to additional steps, interrogation, somebody appointed to argue against them, extra processes, compulsory psychological investigation. To me, these are intrusive. They are effectively barriers, in helping eligible people, once I'm on my last paragraph, I'm really sorry, in helping eligible people to make their own choice for when and how to die at the end of all they've already suffered. I truly believe we must not make the process of gaining permission any more harder or more traumatic than we need to. And while I am listening hard to the arguments made, quite a few of the amendments being proposed today do cross this line for me. These momentous decisions about our deaths must be led by compassion and not be made to seem like yet another battle to face by people who've already given their all to staying alive.
Naz Shah.
Can I first of all thank all members for supporting my amendments number 14 and number 18, and can I also acknowledge and respond to the sponsor who has said she's happy to accept my amendment as of this morning. Madam Deputy Speaker, this increases my concern insofar as the Honourable Member has also, from Spen Valley, has also indicated that there might need to change some of the wording for it to be accepted. In that vein, given that I haven't seen the wording of this new amendment, or proposal of this new amendment, I cannot accept it in its current form until I actually see it in writing and until I'm able to scrutinise that and then make an informed choice. In addition to that, Madam Deputy Speaker, this also raises a further question, and that question is this. This was only told to me this morning after 9:30 on the floor of this House. This was not discussed with me. This has not been, and I'm not sure whether the sponsor has discussed it with the ministers, because this very argument has been hashed out in that bill committee, where many of us spent weeks and weeks scrutinising line by line. And indeed, the honourable member's own amendment 181 attempted during bill committee to strengthen that particular clause 2 that we are talking about in this amendment. And at that point, the ministers, on their feet during the bill committee, outlining their neutrality, did give an opinion that this was not workable. So those amendments that were tabled then, that many of his colleagues argued then, the ministers said were not workable in the government's opinion. So I also want to understand, what is it in the government's opinion that has now changed? Have those assessments been made by the honourable member or the government that these amendments could now be accepted? What this speaks to, and I really, really want to emphasise this to all members listening and the public at home, is this process is flawed, fundamentally flawed. This is not how we make legislation. I take my responsibility, as I'm sure everybody in this House does, extremely, extremely seriously. This is literally a matter of life and death. If this bill passes and it doesn't have the safeguards, there's no coming back from those decisions. So let's go back to my... Happy to give one.
As my husband knows, being on the Bill Committee with me, I had that same advice from ministers that they disagreed with the wording of some of my amendments, yet they were accepted by the bill sponsor, accepted by the committee, and now sit in the wording on the face of the bill. So we are going to... The bill sponsor's position, and the position put to this House will now be, that those amendments are not in line with the government's position. So what is her view on that? That we are going to be asked to support that?
Thank my honourable friend for that intervention, because he's absolutely right. That is the problem with this bill and this process, and how we are being taught, we are being given things on the face of this, on the... Happy to give way.
I thank her for giving way, and I thank her for her passionate contribution. But this is exactly how we make law. We take evidence. We take evidence. We have discussions.
Could I respectfully remind honourable members that we are here for the report stage to debate the amendments to this legislation, not to discuss how
It does not, contrary to many people who have been on the radio and been on other places saying it excludes people from mental health, it does not say on the face of this bill that mental health is excluded. It does not say that. There are It does not say that, and because it's not, I'm not going to give way because I'm going to make progress. I'm very conscious there are lots of colleagues. I remember sitting here, more than 100 of us who didn't get to speak in this debate the first time it was heard in November, and there are many people who might not get to speak today. So I am trying to be, but I am feeling really disheartened, and the reason I feel disheartened is because we've spent, like other members have pointed out, who on this committee, so much time rehashing these arguments, haven't we? And there were opportunities to fix this bill, rather than me having to put these amendments down and others having to put these amendments down and taking up the time and not giving those the opportunity to speak who would have otherwise spoken, Madam Deputy Speaker. So in relation, coming back to my amendment, I've lost complete track of time. I'm sure the Madam Deputy Speaker will indicate I need to be finishing off. So I will come to my concluding remarks. And they are simply this. I've spoken to parents. I've spoken to parents of a girl who had TIAD, which is diabetes and complexities of anorexia. They came to Parliament and they said the law that helped them, the law that assisted them because their daughter wanted to go to Dignitas, was because it would have been illegal. And that's the law we today are trying to change. If the safeguards in this bill fail even once, it will be a young woman like Jessica who dies. It will be parents like Leslie and Neil who lose a child. Madam Deputy Speaker, that is a terrible tragedy no family should ever have to endure. And no one in this House will be able to say truthfully that we did not know or didn't see this coming. That is not compassion. That is abandonment. I will not be complicit in that, and I hope this House will not be either. That is why we must act now. Amendment 14 and Amendment 38, each of those close a different and dangerous loophole. One without the other is not enough. If we are serious about protecting vulnerable people, this House must support both amendments. Thank you.
Members will be aware there are still many wishing to contribute. Could I ask that contributions are kept to 5 minutes? Kit Malthouse.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I am grateful to you. I'm grateful to the sponsoring Minister for having put me on the Bill Committee, where, in my view, we did some excellent work. And while we've heard an awful lot of claims about the process today, I think anybody objective who reads the bill that's now being reported to the House will recognise that it is a strong piece of work that is measured and seeks to strike a balance in what is a difficult area of complexity and humanity and compassion and morality. Before I move on to just discussing 3 or 4 of the amendments, Madam Deputy Speaker, I just wanted to bring the House back to what we're trying to deal with here. We are dealing with a set of people who have been told that their struggle with disease is over, that they are heading towards an inevitable death. There is nothing more that medical science can do for them. And what we're trying to do today is to give them the chance to face death on their own terms. That's the simple mission that the House has been set. The second thing I just wanted members to contemplate as they look at this slew of amendments is, while it is easy to look at each amendment individually and see its merits or demerits, we have to bear in mind the machine we are building as a whole, and the fact that we are putting those people through this process at a time when they are facing the end of that struggle. They are thinking about what the nature of their death is going to be like. They are talking to their friends and family, putting their affairs in order and being concerned about when that awful day is going to come. And we have to have some compassion in the process as well as compassion in the purpose. And so when you consider some of the amendments, which I'm going to highlight in a moment, please have in your mind this idea that we have to put these people through a possibly 2-month process at a moment when they are severely time limited, very often to less than 6 months. So, for example, new clause 7 and 50, my honourable friend from Meriden, which seeks to restrict the number of patients that doctors can deal with in any 12-month period. This will severely restrict access and may mean that patients who are partway through the process have to suddenly change because their doctor is time limited and pushed out. That's notwithstanding the multiple safeguards that are already in the process. Similarly, and my right honourable friend for Kenilworth and Southern gave an interesting speech about Amendment 47. Again, in this amendment, he's creating another step, another delay, another set of problems for the dying person to overcome, or issues for them to address. And in his amendment, I'm sure he's a much better lawyer than me, but I found it odd that he was effectively creating an inexhaustive list of individuals who could be called upon in any circumstance who might be, in inverted commas, properly interested in the welfare of that individual. Now, to me, the person who should be the most interested in their future is the person themselves. And any step we take that cuts across their privacy, their autonomy, and the alacrity with which they can seek this solution to their impending or perceived agony seems to me a step too far. I don't understand how practically the Commission is supposed to ascertain. Is it neighbours? Is it friends? Is it just family? What is the definition of family? We need to put, in a moment, we need to put that contemplation and how they want to handle their death squarely in the hands of a dying person, by all means.
Thank you to the honourable member for letting me raise an intervention. You mentioned that the person is autonomous and should be protected from inquiries around them. But what if that person is not autonomous because they are being coercively controlled by a partner? And what if that partner has prevented them from reaching out to their family to let them know about the fact they are going to take an assisted death? Would it not be a great safeguard to make sure that the panel and all of those doctors around them had ascertained that the family had been told?
Well, the honourable lady makes a good point, and it was a compelling point made at committee, and certainly one that we recognised, and that's why her amendments that were tabled at committee were adopted, specifically on training for everybody involved in the process, that they should be sensitised to detecting those issues, and also that any doctor in the process, and indeed the panel, might want to know why family are not being informed. That's specifically why a social worker is put on the panel, to understand the psychosocial environment in which the person that is taking that decision. But fundamentally, in the end, if I am facing my death in a matter of weeks, and I decide in my capacity that I don't want to inform my family, that is my choice. That is my decision. Now, I may have to explain why to doctors, but
on that point, can I remind members that we really are very short of time? Kit Malthouse.
I'm grateful, Madam Chair. I'll be swift. That is my choice, and this bill is rooted in giving autonomy to those who have capacity and to those who are facing a death, and we should take care to tread carefully upon that right. And then finally, Madam Chair, two amendments by my honourable friend for Reigate. First of all, new clause 16, which is saying that somebody has to be substantially motivated or can't be substantially motivated by certain considerations he's put in the bill. I don't really understand what substantially motivated is meant to mean. And to me, this misunderstands the complexity of what it must be like to be told you're dying. Right? The things that might run through your head, the affairs that you might have to deal with, the news you have to break with your family, the impact it's going to have on your possibly small children, all of these form a cocktail of motivations. But the one thing that I've learned over the last 10 years of campaigning and spending lots of time with dying and bereaved people is that towards the end of their life they have an absolute clarity about what they want. absolute clarity, because it's become clear to them towards the end what their death is going to be like. And at the very least, they want to have the card in their back pocket to play if they require it. Remember, these are people who are facing death, who are struggling with death, and we have to give them the power to advance over it. And then finally, and then I'm just conscious of time, finally, the Amendment A to New Clause 10, which I think we might be facing in division this afternoon, possibly. This is a very difficult amendment, and we debated it, a very similar amendment at committee to talk about. We are very clear as sponsors of the bill that there should be a conscientious objection clause that is strengthened by New Clause 10 to allow individuals to opt out. But allowing an employer, any employer, to say that any employee in their employment cannot then participate if they decide not to, seems to me a step too far and could prove to have unintended consequences. First of all, every healthcare trust in the country, the board of it will become a battle for control for those who oppose and those who don't. We might find that in care homes, as the Honourable Gentleman for Gainsborough, Right Honourable Gentleman for Gainsborough said, in care homes, people may suddenly find they have to uproot themselves after years of living there to relocate, to get the kind of death that they want. And in effect, what this does is prioritise the rights of somebody who's providing accommodation over the rights of the dying. And as I said at second reading, in my view, as they face their end, we should prioritise the rights of the dying.
It would be unprecedented to put a formal time limit on. Please, can members listen to the stricture that we are very short of time. Lizzie Collins.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I was rising to speak to new clauses 1 and 10, but I'll restrict myself to new clause 1 for the sake of time. New clause 1 says that no health professional should raise assisted dying first unless the patient has already raised it. So if the patient doesn't mention the issue, doesn't specifically ask for it, then the doctor would be entirely prohibited from even mentioning it. This is problematic for many different reasons. It goes against good medical practice and it's actively opposed by the British Medical Association. For me, this clause undermines the hard-won rights of people to be fully informed of their medical options and would make the application of the bill unfair and unequal to the detriment, particularly, of marginalised people. Now, new clause 1 would have a very... I'll happily give way.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way. Just this week on the Health and Social Care Select Committee, we heard from vulnerable service users and they talked about white coat syndrome, that people who, when given options, faced with medical professionals, are more likely to be pushed into doing it. And that's the concern here, and that's why this amendment's here. And I don't know how I'm going to vote on the bill, but I am minded to support this amendment because of what I've heard from people from vulnerable communities.
Amendments too need to be brief. Lizzie Collins.
Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank my honourable friend for his intervention. I will expand on this a little bit more. But that's exactly why all options need to be on the table. That's exactly why good medical practice has to have all options on the table, because patients should not be being influenced by the opinions, whether philosophical or medical, of a doctor. What they should be influenced by is by full and informed consent. And I believe new clause 1 would chill those discussions. It would limit the option of assisted death to those already in the know, those who are most medically literate, those who are who are best off and least marginalised in society. It would result in unequal access to a legal process. It flies in the face of good medical practice. Good medical practice has moved away from this paternalistic idea that harmed patients and took away people's individual control. After many years' fight, mainly by women and by marginalised communities, it's now established that good healthcare practice means patients having full information in order to make their own decisions. I'm mindful of time, so I'm going to continue. Why now then, as a chamber, would we choose to give patients, to hide information from patients on their options? So many years people have been put through this. Informed consent to treatment, including end-of-life care, is only informed when it includes all options. There's also the practical element. You know, what would count as a patient raising it first? Would they have to make a specific statement? Would they have to use specific language? It would make a legal and medical minefield for doctors and patients. I would like to finish. I'm very mindful of time, so I'm going to finish with this. Colleagues may wish to look at the NHS Constitution. It says this: you have the right to be involved in planning and making decisions about your health and care with your care provider or providers, including your end-of-life care, and to be given information and support to enable you to do this. That is only the case if people are in fact given that full information. All people should have access to full information on matters of care. To do otherwise is to deny people their decision. It is paternalistic, and we should be moving away from that model, and people have fought so hard for that to happen. We have a chance today, colleagues, to make sure this legislation is the best it can possibly be, and it's been a pleasure to listen to the contributions from across the chamber. When third reading arrives, I am minded to support the amended bill, because the current situation for terminally ill people, the current situation with no safeguards, with no protection and with no choice is absolutely unsupportable. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Dr Ben Spencer.
Thank you, Speaker. And I beg to move amendments 18, 30, 31, 17 and 32 in my name. I start with Amendment 18. There have been many moral arguments put forward for the need of this bill, both in debates inside and outside this place. And the vast majority have focused on the prevention of suffering. There's also been desire for greater control at the end of life, but irreversible suffering has predominated. The principle of bodily autonomy, one which I strongly support in the context of full decision-making capacity and with certain important caveats, is used to justify the rights which this bill will grant. However, putting aside the debate surrounding the bill and focusing on the text and clauses itself, which is the task we face today at report stage, the provisions of this bill are silent of suffering, silent on control, and silent on all but a terminal illness with fewer than 6 months prognosis. If the principle is that we must prevent irreversible suffering, then all those suffering irreversibly should be able to seek physician-assisted suicide. If the principle is that we should give people control, another level of expression of bodily autonomy, then all adults who truly and freely consent with full decision-making capacity should be able to seek physician-assisted suicide. If these principles are circumscribed to an arbitrary definition of terminal illness, the inexorable conclusions must be that either their suffering or autonomy is more important than others, or their lives have less value. And we've seen that subtly imported into this debate. When requesting an assisted death is framed